She dropped to her knees in the flooded gutter, pressing her bare hands against the gaping wound of a dying German shepherd, while her phone buzzed with the final warning, "Exam doors closing in 3 minutes." Blood poured through her fingers. Rain hammered her face. She didn't move. She chose the dog. That choice destroyed her scholarship, her career, her entire future in 7 minutes. But the dog she saved wasn't just any dog. Atlas was a Bronze Star military hero who had taken bullets for his handler. And when Army Green Beret Kyle Brennan discovered a stranger had sacrificed everything for his partner, he declared war on the university that expelled her. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. And if this story touches your heart, please subscribe and stay with us until the very end. Now let the story begin. Elena Mercer's phone alarm had been screaming for 6 minutes before she finally killed it. She sat up in bed, her heart already pounding. The ceiling of her tiny apartment was stained with water damage, and somewhere above her the pipes groaned like they were in pain. But Elena wasn't thinking about the pipes. She was thinking about the clock on her nightstand. 6:47 a.m. Her final certification exam started at 8 Suzuru a.m. The doors would lock at 8 Huzuru sharp. Not 8:01, not 8:02. Dean Victoria Crane had made that abundantly clear in her email last week. Miss Mercer, the email had read, "Given your precarious academic standing, I strongly advise punctuality. The examination committee will not accommodate tardiness for any reason. This is your final opportunity." Elena whispered the words she'd memorized from her mother's funeral 3 years ago. "Get up, keep moving, don't stop." She threw off the blanket and hit the cold floor with bare feet. Her roommate Linda's bed was already empty. Linda had left at 5 a.m. for her own clinical rotation, leaving behind a sticky note on the bathroom mirror. "You've got this, E. Go be a doctor. L." Elena stared at that note while she brushed her teeth. Doctor. The word felt impossibly far away, like a star she'd been reaching for her entire life, but could never quite touch. Her phone buzzed. A text from her academic advisor, Dr. Samuel Torres. "Elena, today's the day. I believe in you. Don't let anything stop you." She typed back quickly. "Thank you, Dr. Torres. I won't let you down." But even as she sent it, doubt crawled up her spine like ice water. Her car had died 5 days ago. A transmission failure that would cost $2,300 to fix. She had $847 in her bank account. So today, she would walk. 2.5 miles in whatever weather Virginia Beach decided to throw at her. She pulled back the curtain and felt her stomach drop. The sky was black. Not gray. Black. The kind of darkness that meant the storm wasn't coming. It was already here. "No," she breathed. "Not today, please, not today." Thunder answered her, a deep rolling boom that shook the windows in their frames. Elena grabbed her scrubs from the chair. They were faded from washing, soft from wear, and they were the only clean pair she had left. She pulled them on, then reached for her sneakers. The left one had a hole near the toe that she'd covered with duct tape. The right one's sole was separating from the canvas. She looked at herself in the cracked bathroom mirror. 25 years old. Dark circles under her eyes. Hair pulled back in a ponytail so tight it gave her a headache. And somewhere behind all that exhaustion, a flicker of something that refused to die. "One more exam," she told her reflection. "Just one more exam and everything changes." She grabbed her backpack, checked for her notes and her ID, and opened the front door. The wind hit her like a physical assault. 73 miles away, the rotors of a Black Hawk helicopter sliced through clouds that looked like bruises. Master Sergeant Kyle Brennan sat in the jump seat, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on nothing. Around him, 4 other Green Berets were running through pre-mission checks, their voices lost in the roar of the engine. But Kyle wasn't listening to them. He was listening to the voice in his head, the one that had been whispering all morning. Something's wrong. He couldn't explain it, couldn't rationalize it. But after 12 years of combat deployments, Kyle had learned to trust his instincts. They'd saved his life more times than he could count. His phone was in his pocket, set to silent. He'd checked it before boarding. No missed calls, no messages, everything was fine. So why couldn't he shake this feeling, Brennan? The voice belonged to Captain Marcus Webb, his commanding officer and closest friend. Webb was a massive man, 6'4", with a prosthetic left leg that he'd earned in Fallujah, and a voice that could cut through any noise. "You with us?" Kyle nodded. "Yeah, just thinking." "About Atlas." Webb's expression softened. Everyone on the team knew about Atlas. The German Shepherd who had detected 3 IEDs in Syria that would have killed their entire squad. The dog who had taken a bullet meant for Kyle and kept fighting anyway. The partner who had earned a Bronze Star and Kyle's eternal loyalty. "He's fine," Webb said. "You left him with that neighbor kid, right, Toby?" "Yeah." "Then relax. We'll be back by 1400. You can spoil him with steak for dinner." Kyle forced a smile. "Right." But the whisper wouldn't stop. Something's wrong. Elena was soaked within 30 seconds of leaving her apartment. The rain wasn't falling. It was attacking. Sheets of water driven sideways by wind that howled through the streets like something angry and alive. She pulled her hood up, knowing it was useless, and started walking. Her route took her down Atlantic Avenue, past the closed beach shops and the empty parking lots. In summer, this street would be packed with tourists. Today, it was a ghost town. Just Elena and the storm and the occasional car that splashed through puddles without slowing down. She checked her phone. 7:12 a.m. She was making good time. If she kept this pace, she'd arrive at 7:45, 15 minutes to spare. Enough time to dry off, calm down, and remember everything she'd studied. Dosage calculations, emergency triage protocols, the anatomy of the canine heart. She recited them in her head as she walked, her lips moving silently. The canine heart has 4 chambers. The right atrium receives deoxygenated blood from the body via the vena cava. A crack of thunder made her jump. It was closer this time, louder, the kind of thunder that seemed to split the sky in half. And somewhere across town, in a small bungalow near the naval base, a German shepherd named Atlas lifted his head. Toby Richardson was 17 years old, and he'd been dog-sitting for exactly 4 hours. When Mr. Brennan had asked him to watch Atlas, Toby had agreed immediately. $50 for a day of hanging out with a cool military dog, easy money. But Mr. Brennan had been very specific about one thing. "Atlas has PTSD, he'd said, his voice serious. "Loud noises trigger him. If there's a storm, keep all the doors and windows closed. Don't let him outside for any reason. He'll panic. He'll run. And if he runs, he might not stop." Toby had nodded, confident. "I got it, Mr. Brennan. No problem." That was before the thunder started. Now Toby stood in the living room, watching Atlas pace back and forth across the hardwood floor. The dog's ears were flat against his skull. His tail was tucked between his legs. His breathing was rapid, shallow, desperate. "Hey, buddy," Toby said, trying to keep his voice calm. "It's okay. It's just a storm. It'll pass." Atlas didn't seem to hear him. The dog's eyes were fixed on something Toby couldn't see. Memories, maybe. Explosions in the desert. The screams of dying men. The smell of blood and smoke. Another crack of thunder. Atlas whimpered. A high, keening sound that made Toby's heart break. Okay, Toby muttered. Let me check if the back door is locked. He walked toward the kitchen, and that's when he made his mistake. He didn't close the living room door behind him. The back door was locked. Toby checked it twice, then turned around. Atlas was standing in the kitchen doorway. His body was rigid. His eyes were wild. Atlas, no. Stay. Another boom of thunder. This one seemed to shake the entire house. Atlas bolted. He shot past Toby like a bullet, his claws scrambling for purchase on the tile floor. He hit the back door at full speed, and the old latch gave way instantly. The door flew open, and Atlas was gone. No! Toby screamed, lunging after him. But by the time he reached the doorway, the German Shepherd had already cleared the fence and disappeared into the storm. Toby's hands were shaking as he grabbed his phone. He called Kyle Brennan's number. It went straight to voicemail. Mr. Brennan, it's Toby. I'm so sorry. Atlas got out. He's gone. I don't know which way he went. I'm going to look for him. I'm so sorry. He hung up and ran into the rain. Elena checked her phone again. 7:38 a.m. She was going to make it. 22 minutes to spare. She allowed herself a small smile, the first one in days. Almost there, she whispered. Almost. She saw the dog. He came out of nowhere, darting between two parked cars on the opposite side of the street. A German Shepherd, massive and dark, moving with the frantic, disoriented gait of an animal in pure panic. Elena's training kicked in immediately. She recognized the signs: dilated pupils, flattened ears. The dog wasn't aggressive. He was terrified. No, she breathed. Don't go into the street. Please don't. The dog stepped off the curb. A delivery truck was coming. White and massive, moving too fast for the conditions. The driver probably couldn't see anything through the rain. Elena screamed. Stop! The truck didn't stop. The impact was sickening. A dull, heavy thud that Elena felt in her chest. The dog was thrown sideways, rolling twice before coming to rest in the gutter. He didn't get up. The truck kept going. The driver either didn't notice or didn't care. Within seconds, it had disappeared into the rain. Elena stood frozen on the sidewalk. She looked at her phone. 7:41 a.m. She looked at the dog lying motionless in the gutter. She looked at the road ahead, the one that led to her exam, her future, her entire life. The rain pounded against her face. The wind screamed in her ears. And in that moment, Elena Mercer heard her mother's voice again. But this time it wasn't saying, keep moving. It was saying something else. What kind of person do you want to be, Elena? She dropped her backpack. She ran into the street. The blood was everywhere. Elena's knees hit the wet pavement, and she immediately pressed her hands against the wound on the dog's side. She could feel the heat of his life pulsing against her palms, trying to escape. Hey, buddy. Hey, I've got you. Stay with me. The dog's eyes opened. Brown and deep and filled with pain. But there was something else there, too. Recognition. Trust. As if he knew that this stranger kneeling in the rain was trying to help him. He didn't growl. He didn't bite. He just looked at her. Elena's training took over. She assessed the damage with rapid, practiced movements. Blunt force trauma to the right side, probable internal bleeding, possible fractured ribs. His gums were pale, his breathing was shallow. He was going into shock. "You're not dying on me," she said through gritted teeth. "You hear me? You're not dying on this street." She looked around desperately. The sidewalks were empty. The cars that passed didn't stop. "Help!" she screamed. "Somebody help me." Nothing. A yellow taxi appeared through the rain, moving slowly. Elena jumped to her feet and ran in front of it, waving her arms. The taxi stopped. The driver rolled down his window, revealing a weathered face and suspicious eyes. "Lady, what the hell are you? I need to get this dog to a vet," Elena said, her voice cracking. "Please, he's dying." The driver looked at the bleeding animal in the gutter. "I ain't getting blood all over my back seat. That's my livelihood. I'll pay for the cleaning. I'll pay double the fare." "Please." The driver shook his head. "Find someone else." He started to roll up his window. "He's a military dog." The words came out before Elena could think about them. She didn't even know if they were true. But the collar around the dog's neck was thick, professional, expensive. The kind of collar that meant someone important owned him. The driver paused. "What? Look at him. Look at that collar. He's military. Someone's partner. Someone's family." The driver stared at the dog for a long moment. Then he looked at Elena. Really looked at her. At the desperation in her eyes. At the blood on her hands. At the way she was shaking not from cold, but from the effort of holding herself together. "Damn it," he muttered. He put the taxi in park and got out. His name was Darnell. He was 67 years old. He'd served 2 tours in Vietnam, and when he knelt beside that German shepherd in the rain, something shifted in his expression. "I know a military working dog when I see one," he said quietly. "I had one in Nam, saved my life more than once." He looked at Elena. "Let's move." Together, they lifted the dog as gently as they could. Atlas whimpered, but didn't struggle. He seemed to understand that these people were trying to help him. They laid him across the back seat of the taxi. Elena climbed in beside him, keeping pressure on the wound. "Coastal Emergency Veterinary Clinic," she said. "It's on—" "I know where it is," Darnell said, already pulling away from the curb. "Hold on." The taxi shot through the rain like a yellow bullet. Elena checked her phone with bloody fingers. 7:52 a.m. The exam room doors were closing. Elena could picture it perfectly. Dr. Victoria Crane, standing at the front of the hall, her silver hair pulled back in a perfect bun, her eyes scanning the rows of students, noting every empty seat, every absent face. Elena's seat was empty. Her future was slipping away with every second that passed. And she didn't care. All she cared about was the dog lying across her lap, his blood soaking into her scrubs, his eyes never leaving her face. "What's your name, buddy?" she whispered gently, touching the tag on his collar. She turned it over and read the engraving. "Atlas Military Working Dog Handler, MSG Kyle Brennan. If found, call 757-555-0147. "Atlas," she said softly. "That's a good name. A strong name. You're going to be okay, Atlas. I promise." The dog's tail moved, just slightly, a weak, exhausted wag that broke Elena's heart. She pulled out her phone and dialed the number on the tag. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then, "This is Kyle Brennan. Leave a message." Elena's voice was steady, but barely. "Mr. Brennan, my name is Elena Mercer. I found your dog, Atlas. He was hit by a car on Atlantic Avenue. I'm taking him to Coastal Emergency Veterinary Clinic right now. He's alive, but he's hurt badly. Please call me back as soon as you can." She hung up and dialed the clinic. "Coastal Emergency, this is Dr. Chen." "Dr. Chen, this is Elena Mercer. I'm a vet tech student. I'm bringing in a German Shepherd with severe blunt force trauma. He's in shock. Possible internal bleeding. I need a surgical team ready." "How far out are you?" Elena looked at Darnell. "How long?" 4 minutes. 4 minutes, Elena repeated. "We'll be ready," Dr. Chen said. Elena hung up and looked down at Atlas. His eyes were starting to close. "No," she said firmly. "No, Atlas. Stay with me. Open your eyes. Look at me." The dog's eyes fluttered open. "Good boy. That's a good boy. Just a little longer. Just hold on a little longer." Darnell's voice came from the front seat. "You're gonna miss your exam, aren't you?" Elena didn't answer. "I heard you on the phone earlier," Darnell continued. "Telling that professor you wouldn't let him down. This exam, it's important. It's everything," Elena whispered. "Then why?" Elena looked at the dog in her arms, at the trust in his eyes, at the life that was slowly, steadily slipping away. "Because some things matter more than everything." Darnell was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. "Yeah," he said softly. "Yeah, they do." The taxi pulled into the clinic parking lot at 7:59 a.m. The surgical team was waiting. Dr. Chen, a small woman with steady hands and kind eyes, took one look at Atlas and started barking orders. "Get him on the table. Start an IV. I need blood typed and cross-matched. Move." Elena tried to follow, but a nurse stopped her at the door. "Family only beyond this point." "I'm not family. I'm the one who found him." "Then you need to wait here." Elena wanted to argue. She wanted to push past the nurse and stay with Atlas to see this through to the end. But she knew the rules. She knew how this worked. So she stepped back. The surgical doors swung closed, and Elena Mercer stood alone in the waiting room, covered in blood, shaking from cold, and adrenaline staring at the clock on the wall. 8:03 a.m. Her phone buzzed, a text message from an automated system. "Coastal Virginia Veterinary College examination period has concluded. Your absence has been recorded. Report to Dean Crane's office at 10:00 a.m. Elena read the message 3 times. Then she sat down in the nearest chair, put her face in her bloody hands, and cried. The helicopter landed at Fort Bragg at 8:47 a.m. Kyle Brennan was the first one off his boots hitting the tarmac before the rotors had fully stopped. He pulled out his phone, and his heart stopped. 17 missed calls, 3 from Toby Richardson, the rest from numbers he didn't recognize, and 1 voicemail that changed everything. "Mr. Brennan, my name is Elena Mercer. I found your dog Atlas. He was hit by a car." Kyle didn't hear the rest. He was already running. Elena didn't know how long she sat in that waiting room. Minutes blurred into hours. The blood on her scrubs dried and turned brown. Other people came and went, cradling cats in carriers and dogs on leashes, all of them giving her strange looks, but saying nothing. At some point, someone pressed a cup of coffee into her hands. She didn't drink it. At some point, her phone buzzed again. Another message from the college. Another reminder about her meeting with Dean Crane. She didn't respond. The surgical doors finally opened at 11:23 a.m. Dr. Chen walked out, pulling off her surgical cap. Her scrubs were splattered with blood. Her face was exhausted, but calm. Elena jumped to her feet. He's alive?" The words hit Elena like a physical force. Her knees buckled and she grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. He had a ruptured spleen, Dr. Chen continued. We had to remove it. 3 broken ribs, significant blood loss. But he's stable now. He's a fighter. Can I see him? Dr. Chen studied her for a moment. You're the one who found him? Yes. The one who applied pressure to the wound, who kept him calm in the car. Yes. Dr. Chen nodded slowly. The surgeon said that if you'd waited 10 more minutes, he would have died. Whatever you did in that street, it saved his life. Elena felt fresh tears sliding down her cheeks. I couldn't leave him there. I know, Dr. Chen said gently. Come on, I'll take you to him. Atlas was lying on a padded surgical table surrounded by monitors and IV lines. His eyes were closed. His breathing was slow and steady. A thick bandage was wrapped around his midsection. Elena approached carefully, her hand trembling as she reached out to touch his head. At her touch, Atlas's eyes opened. For a moment, they just looked at each other. The woman who had sacrificed everything. The dog who had almost lost it all. Then Atlas's tail moved. A weak, exhausted wag. And Elena Mercer smiled through her tears. Hey, buddy, she whispered. I told you you'd be okay. Atlas licked her hand. Elena's meeting with Dean Crane was at 10 Huzura a.m. She didn't arrive until 1:15 p.m. She walked into the administration building still wearing her blood-stained scrubs, her hair a disaster, her eyes red from crying. Every person she passed stared at her. She didn't care. Dean Crane's office was on the 3rd floor. The door was solid oak, the nameplate polished brass. Victoria Crane, Dean of Veterinary Sciences. Elena knocked. Enter. She opened the door. Dean Crane sat behind a massive mahogany desk, her silver hair perfect, her gray suit immaculate. Behind her, a large window overlooked the campus quad. On the wall hung a framed plaque with gold lettering, Excellence through Discipline, Zero Tolerance for Failure. The dean looked up, and her expression shifted from annoyance to disgust. Miss Mercer, you're 3 hours late, and you appear to be covered in blood. It's not my blood. I can see that. Sit down. Elena sat. Dean Crane folded her hands on the desk. Her fingers were long and thin, like the legs of a spider. Do you know why you're here? Because I missed my exam. Because you missed your final certification exam. The exam that determines whether you graduate from this program. The exam that your scholarship specifically requires you to complete. Dean Crane's voice was cold, precise, surgical. You were warned, Miss Mercer, multiple times. I sent you a personal email emphasizing the importance of punctuality. I know. Then why weren't you there? Elena met the dean's eyes. A dog was hit by a car. He was dying. I stopped to help him. Silence. Dean Crane's expression didn't change. A dog. Yes, you sacrificed your entire academic career for a dog. Elena thought about Atlas, about his eyes looking up at her in the rain, about the trust she saw there. Yes. Dean Crane leaned back in her chair. Miss Mercer, I have been the dean of this institution for 11 years. In that time, I have heard every excuse imaginable. Students who claim their grandmother died, usually multiple times. Students who claim car trouble, medical emergencies, family crises. I have learned that excuses are simply lies dressed in sympathetic clothing. I'm not lying. I didn't say you were. Dean Crane picked up a pen and began writing on a form. I said excuses are irrelevant. What matters is results. You failed to appear for your examination. Therefore, you have failed the examination." Elena felt her heart stop. "You're failing me? I'm following protocol." The dean didn't look up. "Your scholarship has been revoked. Your enrollment has been terminated. You have 72 hours to vacate any campus housing and return any college property." Furthermore, Dean Crane continued, "given the severity of this violation, I am recommending that a formal notation be placed in your academic record. Any future attempts to transfer credits or enroll in similar programs will require disclosure of this incident." Elena couldn't breathe. "You're blacklisting me." Now Dean Crane looked up. Her eyes were cold, empty, utterly devoid of compassion. "I'm protecting the integrity of this institution. We produce doctors here, Miss Mercer. Doctors who are reliable. Doctors who follow rules. Doctors who understand that personal whims do not supersede professional obligations. It wasn't a whim. A living creature was dying. Then you should have called animal control and continued to your examination." Dean Crane signed the form with a flourish. "This conversation is over. Please leave my office." Elena sat frozen. Everything she had worked for, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every skipped meal, every penny scraped together, all of it gone, because she stopped to save a life. "This isn't right," she whispered. "Right is subjective," Dean Crane replied. "Rules are not. Good day, Miss Mercer." Elena stood slowly. Her legs felt like they belonged to someone else. She walked to the door, opened it, and stepped into the hallway. The door closed behind her. And Elena Mercer's dream died in that hallway, bleeding out just as surely as Atlas had bled in that storm drain. Kyle Brennan drove 6 hours through the worst storm Virginia had seen in a decade. He didn't stop for gas. He didn't stop for food. He didn't stop when his commanding officer called to ask where the hell he was going. He just drove. At 3:17 a.m., he pulled into the parking lot of Coastal Emergency Veterinary Clinic. The rain had stopped. The world was quiet, washed clean by the storm. Kyle got out of his truck and walked toward the entrance, his boots echoing on the wet pavement. The night nurse looked up when he entered. "Can I help you?" "My dog is here, Atlas, German Shepherd." The nurse's expression softened. "You're Master Sergeant Brennan?" "Yes." "He's in recovery room 3. I'll take you to him." Kyle followed her down a quiet hallway lined with closed doors. The smell of antiseptic and wet fur filled his nostrils. His heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. The nurse stopped at a door marked 3 and pushed it open. Atlas was lying on a padded bed, surrounded by softly beeping monitors. His side was wrapped in white bandages. His breathing was slow and steady. But when he heard the door open, his eyes snapped awake. And when he saw Kyle, his tail started wagging so hard that his entire body shook. Kyle crossed the room in 3 strides and dropped to his knees beside the bed. He wrapped his arms around his dog, burying his face in Atlas's fur. "Hey, buddy," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Hey, I'm here. I'm here." Atlas whimpered and licked Kyle's face, his tail never stopping. For a long moment, they just held each other. The soldier and the dog who had saved each other's lives more times than either could count. Finally, Kyle pulled back. He looked at the bandages, the monitors, the IV line. "What happened?" he asked the nurse. "Who found him?" "A young woman," the nurse said. "Elena Mercer. She brought him in herself. Applied pressure to the wound in the field kept him calm during transport. The surgeon said she saved his life." Kyle felt something shift in his chest. "Where is she now?" "I don't know. She waited here for hours. Then she got some kind of call and left. She looked devastated. Devastated? The nurse hesitated. I heard her on the phone, something about being expelled from school. Kyle stared at her. Expelled? She was supposed to be at some exam this morning. She missed it because she was here with Atlas. The words hit Kyle like a punch to the gut. This woman, this stranger, had sacrificed her entire career to save his dog. And now she had nothing. Kyle looked down at Atlas, at the bandages, at the steady rise and fall of his breathing. "What's her address?" he asked. "I can't give out patient information. She's not a patient. She's a hero." Kyle's voice was quiet, but there was steel beneath it. "And I need to find her." The nurse studied him for a long moment. Then she sighed. "There's a diner on Atlantic Avenue. Open 24 hours. I heard her mention she works there." Kyle nodded. "Thank you." He looked at Atlas one more time. "I'll be back, buddy. I promise." Then he walked out into the night. The diner was called the Lucky Star, though there was nothing lucky about it. It was a tired building with flickering neon signs and a parking lot full of cracks. The kind of place where truck drivers stopped for coffee at 3 a.m. and lonely people came to escape the silence of their apartments. Kyle pushed through the front door. A bell jangled overhead. The interior was almost empty. 2 old men sat at the counter nursing cups of coffee. A family with exhausted children occupied a booth near the back. And behind the counter, wiping down the coffee machine, stood a young woman in a faded uniform. She had dark circles under her eyes. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her hands moved mechanically like she was operating on autopilot. Kyle recognized the look. He'd seen it in the mirror after every friend he'd lost overseas. The look of someone whose world had just ended. He walked to the counter and sat down. The woman didn't look up. "Coffee." "Please." She poured him a cup. Her hands were steady, but Kyle noticed the tremor in her shoulders, the way she kept blinking like she was fighting back tears. "Anything else?" Kyle looked at her name tag. Elena. "You're Elena Mercer," he said quietly. Her hands froze on the coffee pot. "You saved my dog today." Elena looked up. For the first time, she really saw him. The exhaustion in his face, the military bearing, the dog tags hanging around his neck. "You're Kyle Brennan," she whispered. "Yeah. Is Atlas okay? He's alive, because of you." Elena set down the coffee pot. Her hands were shaking now. "I couldn't just leave him there. He was looking at me and I couldn't." Her voice broke. Kyle reached across the counter and took her hand. "The nurse told me what happened," he said. "She told me you missed your exam. She told me you got expelled." Elena pulled her hand away and wiped her eyes. "It doesn't matter. It matters to me." "Why? You don't even know me." My Kyle was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke, his voice low and steady. "When I was in Syria, there was a moment when I thought I was going to die. My team had walked into an ambush, bullets everywhere. 2 of my friends were already down. I was pinned behind a concrete wall with no way out." Elena stopped wiping the counter. "Atlas found the shooter," Kyle continued. "He crossed 50 yards of open ground under fire, took down the enemy combatant, and gave me the opening I needed to save my team." He paused. "That dog saved my life. He saved the lives of everyone I love." He looked at Elena. "And you saved him, a stranger's dog, an animal you'd never met. You gave up everything to save him." Elena felt tears sliding down her cheeks again. I didn't think about it. I just acted. I know, Kyle said. That's why it matters. He stood up from the counter. I don't know how yet, he said, but I'm going to fix this. The school, the exam, all of it. You sacrificed your future for my family. I'm not going to let that stand. Elena shook her head. You can't. The dean, I've spent 12 years taking on enemies who thought they couldn't be beaten, Kyle interrupted. I've never lost a fight I believed in. He pulled out a $20 bill and set it on the counter. That's for the coffee. I'll be in touch, Elena Mercer. He walked toward the door, then stopped. Thank you, he said without turning around, for saving him, for saving part of me. The bell jangled as he walked out into the night, and Elena stood alone behind the counter, her heart pounding, wondering if hope was something she was still allowed to feel. Outside, Kyle climbed into his truck and sat in silence for a long moment. He thought about Elena, about the choice she'd made, about the price she'd paid. He thought about Dean Crane, about rules that crushed compassion, about systems that punished people for doing the right thing. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found a name. Marcus Webb, Captain. He pressed dial. Webb answered on the second ring. Brennan, it's 4 a.m. What the hell? I need your help. With what? Kyle stared at the diner at the flickering neon sign at the silhouette of the woman still standing behind the counter. I need to start a war. Marcus Webb was silent for exactly 4 seconds. A war, he repeated. At 4 a.m. Against who? A university dean who just destroyed an innocent woman's life. Brennan, I need you to slow down and explain what the hell is going on. Kyle gripped the steering wheel with his free hand. Atlas got hit by a car yesterday. A vet student found him bleeding out in the street. She had her final exam starting in 15 minutes. The exam that would make her a doctor. The exam her entire future depended on. And she chose Atlas. She missed the exam. She saved his life. Kyle's voice hardened. And now she's been expelled. Scholarship revoked. Career destroyed. Because she stopped to help a dying animal instead of walking past. Webb was quiet again. When he spoke, his voice had changed. What's the dean's name? Victoria Crane. And the student, Elena Mercer. Kyle heard Webb typing on a keyboard. Give me 24 hours. I'll see what I can dig up. I don't have 24 hours. This woman is working a graveyard shift at a diner right now because her entire life just fell apart. Then what do you want me to do? Kyle thought about Elena's face. The exhaustion. The devastation. The way she'd kept moving even though her world had ended. I want you to help me burn that dean's career to the ground. Webb let out a long breath. You know I'm with you. I'm always with you. But this isn't a military operation. You can't just storm in and watch me. Kyle, she saved Atlas Marcus. She saved him knowing it would cost her everything, and she did it anyway. Kyle's voice cracked slightly. When's the last time you saw someone do something like that? Webb was silent. I'll call you in the morning, Kyle said. Start making calls. Anyone you know who's been screwed over by bureaucrats. Anyone who hates seeing good people punished for doing the right thing. That's half the veteran community. Then we've got an army. Kyle hung up. He sat in his truck for another long moment watching the lights of the diner flicker in the darkness. Then he started the engine and drove back to the clinic. Atlas was waiting for him. The next morning, Elena woke up at 6 a.m. in her tiny apartment to find 17 text messages on her phone. 14 were from classmates she barely knew asking what happened, asking if the rumors were true. 2 were from Linda, her roommate expressing shock and offering support. 1 was from Dr. Samuel Torres. "Elena, I just heard. Come to my office at 9 a.m. We need to talk." She stared at that message for a long time. Dr. Torres had been her mentor since her first semester. He'd written her recommendation letters, he'd advocated for her scholarship, he'd believed in her when no one else did. And now she would have to look him in the eye and tell him that she'd thrown it all away. Elena showered, dressed in clean clothes for the first time in 2 days, and walked to campus. The whispers started the moment she entered the veterinary sciences building. Students she'd studied with for 3 years looked at her and then looked away. Conversation stopped when she approached. Someone actually laughed. Elena kept her head up and kept walking. Dr. Torres's office was on the 2nd floor, a small room crammed with books and anatomical models and framed photographs of animals he'd treated over his 40-year career. He was 63 years old, with gray hair and kind eyes that had seen too much suffering to judge anyone for their choices. He stood up when Elena entered. "Close the door," he said quietly. She did. "Sit down." She sat. For a long moment, Torres just looked at her. Then he sighed. "Tell me what happened. Everything." So Elena told him. The storm, the dog, the choice, the blood on her hands as she pressed against Atlas's wound, the taxi ride, the surgery, the meeting with Dean Crane. When she finished, Torres was leaning back in his chair with his eyes closed. "Dr. Torres, I'm sorry. I know you fought for my scholarship. I know you believed in me. Stop." Elena fell silent. Torres opened his eyes. "Do you know why I became a veterinarian?" "No. Because when I was 8 years old, I found a dog on the side of the road. Hit by a car, bleeding, dying." He smiled slightly. "Sound familiar?" Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "I carried that dog 2 miles to the nearest vet clinic. I was covered in blood. My mother was furious. She said I'd ruined my school clothes. She said I was going to be late for dinner." Torres paused. "The vet saved the dog, and I knew right then that I wanted to spend my life doing what that man did." He leaned forward. "Elena, what you did yesterday wasn't wrong. It was the most right thing I've heard about in years." "Then why am I being punished for it?" Torres's expression darkened. "Because Victoria Crane doesn't care about what's right. She cares about control. She cares about her reputation. She cares about statistics and graduation rates and making sure no one ever challenges her authority." "So there's nothing I can do." "I didn't say that." Torres reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a folder. "I've been at this institution for 22 years. I've watched Victoria Crane expel 14 students during her tenure as dean. Do you know what they all had in common?" Elena shook her head. "They all did something compassionate, something human, something that violated her precious rules but demonstrated exactly the kind of character we should be cultivating in future doctors." He opened the folder. "Marcus Chen expelled for leaving a clinical rotation early to help a student having a panic attack. Jennifer Okoye expelled for missing a deadline because she was volunteering at an animal shelter after a hurricane. David Reeves expelled for refusing to euthanize a healthy dog during a training exercise." Elena stared at the folder. "You kept records. I kept records because I knew someday someone would need them." Torres pushed the folder across the desk. "Victoria Crane has built her career on crushing people like you, people who care too much, people who put compassion above compliance. What am I supposed to do with this?" Torres smiled. "I don't know yet, but I'm not going to let her destroy you without a fight." The door to the office suddenly burst open. A young woman with short red hair and frantic eyes stood in the doorway. Elena recognized her immediately. Sarah Park, a second-year student who worked in the administrative office. "Dr. Torres," Sarah gasped. "You need to see this. Both of you. Right now." They followed her down the hallway to the student lounge, where a crowd had gathered around the television mounted on the wall. A local news anchor was speaking, her face serious. The story has gone viral overnight. A Virginia Beach veterinary student allegedly sacrificed her academic career to save the life of a military working dog. The dog, named Atlas, is a decorated veteran of the Syrian conflict and has been credited with saving multiple American lives overseas. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. The screen cut to a photograph. It was Atlas wearing his military vest, standing next to a soldier in combat gear. The soldier was Kyle Brennan. Master Sergeant Kyle Brennan, the dog's handler, released a statement early this morning calling the student Elena Mercer a hero. He's calling on the university to overturn her expulsion and is organizing a protest at the campus gates. The screen cut to video footage. Elena's legs nearly gave out. Dozens of people were gathered outside the university's main entrance. Many of them wore veterans' caps or American Legion jackets. They carried signs that read, "She saved one of ours," and "Honor isn't a policy violation," and "Atlas says reinstate Elena." Standing at the front of the crowd, being interviewed by a reporter, was Kyle Brennan. "This woman gave up everything to save my dog," Kyle was saying, his voice steady and clear. "Atlas saved my life twice in combat. He saved the lives of my teammates. He's a hero. And Elena Mercer treated him like one, even though she'd never met him, even though it cost her future." The reporter asked, "What do you want to see happen?" "I want this university to do the right thing. I want them to recognize that compassion isn't a weakness. I want them to reinstate Elena Mercer and let her become the doctor she deserves to be." The crowd behind him erupted in cheers. Elena couldn't breathe. Dr. Torres put a hand on her shoulder. "It seems," he said quietly, "that you're not as alone as you thought." Elena's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Kyle Brennan. I told you I'd fix this. Come to the front gate when you're ready. We're just getting started." The crowd outside the university had doubled by the time Elena reached the front gate. She pushed through a sea of veterans reporters and curious students until she found Kyle standing near a makeshift podium made from wooden pallets. He turned when he saw her approaching. "Elena, what did you do? What I said I'd do." Kyle gestured at the crowd. "These are my people. Veterans, their families. People who understand what sacrifice means." "This is insane. You can't tell the truth." Kyle stepped closer. "You saved Atlas's life. You deserve to have people know that." "I don't want people to know. I just want my life back." "Then let me get it back for you." A reporter spotted them talking and rushed over camera crew in tow. "Miss Mercer, can you tell us what happened yesterday?" Elena froze. Kyle stepped between her and the camera. "She's not ready for interviews yet. Give her space." "But the public wants to hear her side of the story." "The public can wait." The reporter started to argue, but something in Kyle's expression made her back off. Kyle took Elena's arm and guided her away from the crowd toward a quieter corner near the parking lot. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to overwhelm you. I couldn't let this stand. You barely know me. I know enough." Kyle looked at her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "I know you saw a dying animal and didn't think twice about helping. I know you held him in your arms while your future slipped away. I know you stayed with him until you were sure he'd survive. Anyone would have done that." "No." Kyle shook his head. "They wouldn't. I've seen what people do when it costs them something. I've seen soldiers abandon wounded comrades. I've seen civilians step over homeless veterans on the street. I've seen doctors refuse to treat patients who can't pay. His jaw tightened. What you did was rare, and I'm not going to let it be punished. Elena felt tears threatening again. She blinked them back. The Dean won't change her mind, she said. I've seen what she does to people who challenge her. Then we won't change her mind. We'll go over her head. To who? Kyle smiled grimly. Everyone. Inside the administration building, Dean Victoria Crane stood at her office window, watching the growing crowd with cold fury. Her assistant, a nervous young man named Peter, stood behind her. Ma'am, the media is requesting a statement. Tell them no comment. But ma'am, the story is spreading. It's on every local channel. It's trending on social media. I said no comment? Peter hesitated. The Board of Regents has called an emergency meeting. They want you there at 2 p.m. Crane turned slowly. Her face was perfectly composed, but her eyes were volcanic. An emergency meeting. About a student who failed to appear for an examination. They're saying the optics are bad. A military dog. A veteran. A young woman who sacrificed everything. Peter swallowed nervously. They're worried about the university's reputation. The university's reputation is built on standards, on discipline, on rules that apply equally to everyone. Crane's voice was ice. If we make exceptions for every sob story, we become meaningless. I understand, ma'am. But the board can discuss whatever they like. My decision stands. Peter nodded and practically fled the office. Crane turned back to the window. The crowd was still growing. She could see the signs, the cameras, the faces of people who thought they could pressure her into backing down. They didn't understand. She had built her career on being unmovable. On being the dean who never bent, never broke, never showed weakness. She had expelled students, who begged students, who cried students, whose families had donated millions to the university. She wasn't going to break now. Not for some bleeding heart girl who thought saving a dog made her special. Her phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID. Governor's office. Crane's expression flickered for just a moment. Then she answered. This is Dean Crane. Dean Crane, this is Margaret Liu, assistant to Governor Thompson. The governor has become aware of the situation at your institution. He'd like to understand the circumstances before making any public statements. There are no circumstances. A student violated policy. She was disciplined accordingly. The policy being that she missed an examination. Correct. Because she was saving the life of a decorated military dog. Crane's grip tightened on the phone. The reason is irrelevant. The policy is clear. There was a pause on the other end. Dean Crane, the governor, is a Navy veteran. He served 2 tours in Vietnam. He has strong feelings about how we treat those who serve our country and the animals who serve alongside them. With all due respect, the governor's feelings don't determine university policy. Another pause. Longer this time. I'll convey your position to him. Good day, Dean Crane. The line went dead. Crane set down the phone. Her hand was trembling slightly. She looked back out the window at the crowd. For the first time in 11 years, she felt something she hadn't felt since she was a junior faculty member fighting for tenure. Fear. The Board of Regents convened at 2 p.m. in a wood-paneled conference room that smelled of old money and older grudges. 12 people sat around a massive oak table. 8 men, 4 women. All of them over 60. All of them wealthy. All of them deeply concerned about the camera crews parked outside the building. Dean Crane sat at one end of the table, her posture rigid, her face a mask. The board chair, a silver-haired man named Howard Blackwell, cleared his throat. "Dean Crane, thank you for joining us on such short notice." "Of course. I assume you're aware of why we've called this meeting." "I am." "Then perhaps you could explain in your own words the circumstances surrounding the expulsion of Elena Mercer." Crane folded her hands on the table. "Miss Mercer failed to appear for her final certification examination. Per university policy, failure to appear results in automatic failure. Per the terms of her scholarship, failure of a required examination results in revocation. The decision was straightforward. And the reason for her absence? Irrelevant." A woman at the far end of the table, a retired judge named Patricia Chen, leaned forward. "I understand she was assisting an injured animal, a military working dog. The nature of her activity during the examination period doesn't change the fact that she was absent. Even if that activity was saving a life." Crane's eyes hardened. "Judge Chen, if we make exceptions for every student who claims a compelling reason for missing an examination, we open ourselves to endless manipulation. Students will manufacture emergencies. Standards will collapse. Our degree will become meaningless." "But this wasn't manufactured," another board member said. "We have veterinary clinic records. We have witness statements. We have video from the taxi driver's dash cam." The veracity of the excuse doesn't change the policy. The room fell silent. Howard Blackwell rubbed his forehead. "Dean Crane, I appreciate your commitment to standards. We all do. But you must understand our position. There are currently over 200 people outside this building calling for your resignation. The story is national news. The governor has personally expressed interest in the outcome. The governor has no authority over internal university decisions." "No, but he has significant influence over our state funding." Blackwell's voice sharpened. "We receive $40 million annually from the state. That funding is subject to legislative approval. And right now 3 state senators have issued public statements supporting the student." Crane felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" Blackwell exchanged glances with the other board members. "We're asking you to reconsider. Hold a formal hearing. Give the student a chance to present her case. Let the process play out publicly, transparently, in a way that demonstrates our commitment to fairness. And if I refuse..." Silence. Patricia Chen spoke, her voice cold. "Dean Crane, we're not asking." The hearing was scheduled for 3 days later. Elena spent those 3 days in a fog of media requests, phone calls, and preparations she didn't understand. Kyle assigned her a lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Caroline Webb, who turned out to be Marcus Webb's sister and who had spent 15 years fighting for veterans' rights. "We're going to win this," Caroline told her during their first meeting. "The facts are on our side. The public is on our side. All we need to do is present the truth and let Victoria Crane hang herself." "You don't know her," Elena said. She's not like other people. She doesn't care about facts or public opinion. She only cares about control." Carolyn smiled thinly. "Then we take away her control." On the night before the hearing, Elena sat alone in her apartment, staring at the wall. Her phone buzzed. A text from Kyle. "Can I come up? I have someone who wants to see you." 2 minutes later, there was a knock at her door. She opened it to find Kyle standing in the hallway. And beside him, walking slowly but standing tall, was Atlas. Elena dropped to her knees. "Oh my God." "Atlas." The German shepherd's tail wagged furiously. He pressed his massive head against her chest, whimpering softly, his whole body vibrating with joy. Elena wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his fur. "Hey, buddy," she whispered. "Hey, I missed you." Atlas licked her face, his tongue warm and wet against her tears. Kyle watched them for a long moment. His expression was unreadable. "He's been asking for you," he said quietly. "Dogs can't ask." "This one can." Kyle smiled slightly. "He's been restless for days, pacing, whining, looking at the door like he's waiting for someone." He paused. "I think he knows what you did for him." Elena looked up at the soldier standing in her doorway. This man who had mobilized an army for her. This stranger who had become her champion. "Why are you doing all this?" she asked. "Really? The truth?" Kyle was quiet for a moment. "Because I've spent 12 years fighting wars on the other side of the world. I've killed people I never met. I've watched friends die for reasons that stopped making sense a long time ago." His voice was rough. "And then I come home and I find out that someone I never met was willing to give up everything to save the one thing in this world that kept me sane." He looked at Atlas, then at Elena. "You gave me hope," he said. "Hope that maybe this country still has people worth fighting for. People who do the right thing even when it costs them. People who see a stranger's pain and don't just walk by." Elena felt tears sliding down her face again. "I'm scared," she admitted. "About tomorrow. About what happens if we lose." Kyle knelt down beside her, one hand on Atlas's head, one hand on Elena's shoulder. "You're not going to lose," he said, "because you're not fighting alone. Not anymore." Atlas barked once, as if in agreement, and for the first time in days, Elena Mercer felt something she'd thought was lost forever. Hope. The morning of the hearing, Elena woke up to find a package outside her door. Inside was a brand new blazer, professional, and perfectly sized, with a note attached. "For the doctor you're about to become, Kay." She put it on and looked at herself in the mirror. She barely recognized the woman staring back at her. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Torres. "Ready?" she typed back. "Ready?" The hearing room was packed to capacity. Every seat was filled. People lined the walls. Camera crews had set up in the back. Outside, the crowd had grown to nearly 500 people. Elena walked in and felt every eye in the room turn toward her. She kept her head high. Carolyn Webb was already at the petitioner's table, files spread before her, ready for battle. Dean Crane sat at the opposite table, flanked by 2 university lawyers who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. The Board of Regents filed in and took their seats at the raised platform. Howard Blackwell banged his gavel. "This hearing will come to order." Elena sat down. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. "We are here to review the expulsion of Elena Mercer from the Coastal Virginia Veterinary College program. The petitioner may begin." Carolyn Webb stood up. "Members of the board, we are here today because of a choice. A choice made by a young woman who saw a dying animal and decided that his life was worth more than her convenience, more than her schedule, more than her career." She walked toward the center of the room. "The facts are not in dispute. On the morning of October 15th, Elena Mercer was walking to her final certification examination. She witnessed a German shepherd later identified as Atlas, a decorated military working dog, being struck by a vehicle. The driver fled the scene. The dog was dying. Caroline paused. Elena Mercer had 7 minutes to reach her examination before the doors closed. She knew that missing this exam would end her academic career. She knew her scholarship would be revoked. She knew everything she had worked for would be destroyed. She turned to face Dean Crane. And she stopped anyway. She rendered emergency medical care. She transported the animal to a veterinary clinic. She stayed with him until she was sure he would survive. Caroline picked up a document from her table. I have here the medical report from Coastal Emergency Veterinary Clinic. It states, and I quote, "The emergency triage performed in the field by Ms. Mercer was directly responsible for the animal's survival. A delay of 10 minutes would have resulted in death." She set down the document. Elena Mercer saved a life, and for that act of compassion she was expelled. Howard Blackwell looked at Dean Crane. "Dean Crane, would you like to respond?" Crane stood up. Her face was calm, composed, utterly without emotion. "The policy is clear. Absence from a final examination results in automatic failure. Miss Mercer was absent. She failed. The decision was appropriate." "Even given the circumstances?" Patricia Chen asked. "Especially given the circumstances." Crane's voice was cool. "If we make exceptions for sympathetic stories, we invite chaos. Every student with a dying grandmother, a car accident, a personal emergency will expect accommodation. Standards exist precisely to prevent such erosion." "But this wasn't a grandmother," another board member said. "This was a documented emergency involving a military animal. The nature of the emergency is irrelevant. The policy makes no distinction between types of absence." Caroline stepped forward. "Then perhaps the policy should be changed." "That's not for this hearing to decide." "Actually," Caroline said, "I believe it is." She turned to the board. "I'd like to call a witness, Master Sergeant Kyle Brennan." The doors at the back of the room opened. Kyle Brennan walked in. He was wearing his full dress uniform, every medal, every ribbon, every symbol of the years he'd spent serving his country. And walking beside him, matching his pace perfectly, was Atlas. The room erupted. Cameras flashed. People gasped. Dean Crane's face went white. "This is highly irregular," she said, her voice rising. "Animals are not permitted in official hearings." Kyle stopped at the front of the room and turned to face her. "This animal," he said, his voice cutting through the noise, "holds a bronze star for saving American lives. He's earned the right to be anywhere I am." The board members exchanged glances. Howard Blackwell banged his gavel. "Order! Order!" The room slowly quieted. "Master Sergeant Brennan," Blackwell said, "you may give your testimony." Kyle looked out at the packed room, at the cameras, at the faces of strangers who had come to support a woman they'd never met. Then he looked at Elena, and he began to speak. "3 years ago, I was in Syria. My team was moving through a village that was supposed to be cleared. It wasn't." His voice was steady, but his eyes were distant, seeing something none of them could see. "There was an IED buried in the road. Enough explosive to turn our entire convoy into shrapnel. Atlas detected it. He alerted. He saved 6 lives that day." Kyle paused. 2 months later, we walked into an ambush. I took a bullet in the shoulder. I was pinned down, bleeding out with enemy fighters closing in. Atlas crossed 50 yards of open ground under fire. He took down the shooter who had me in his sights. He took a bullet doing it. He saved my life. The room was absolutely silent. "This dog," Kyle said, putting his hand on Atlas's head, "is not a pet. He's not property. He's a soldier. He's a hero. And when he was lying in a gutter bleeding to death, a stranger chose to save him." He looked at Dean Crane. Elena Mercer didn't know whose dog she was saving. She didn't know about the Bronze Star, or the deployments, or the lives Atlas had saved. She just saw an animal in pain, and she couldn't walk away. Kyle's voice hardened. "That's not a policy violation. That's character. That's exactly what we should be looking for in the people we trust to save lives." He turned back to the board. "I've spent 12 years serving this country. I've seen the best and worst of humanity, and I'm telling you what Elena Mercer did that morning is something most people never have the courage to do." He paused. She deserves to be a doctor, and if this institution can't see that, then maybe the institution is the one that needs to be expelled. The room exploded into applause. Howard Blackwell banged his gavel repeatedly, but no one was listening. Elena sat frozen, tears streaming down her face as the crowd roared its approval. And at her table, Dean Victoria Crane sat motionless, watching her carefully constructed world begin to crumble around her. The applause lasted for nearly 2 minutes. Howard Blackwell gave up trying to restore order. He sat back in his chair and let the crowd exhaust itself. When the noise finally died down, he leaned forward. "Thank you, Master Sergeant Brennan. Your testimony is noted." Kyle nodded and stepped back, Atlas moving with him like a shadow. Dean Crane stood up immediately. Her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "I would like to cross-examine the witness." Carolyn Webb raised an eyebrow. "This isn't a criminal trial, Dean Crane. There's no cross-examination." "Then I would like to make a statement in response." Blackwell waved his hand. "Proceed." Crane walked to the center of the room. She moved slowly, deliberately, like a predator circling wounded prey. Her eyes never left Kyle's face. "Master Sergeant Brennan, I have nothing but respect for your service to this country. Your sacrifices are appreciated by every American." "But," Kyle said, "but your emotional attachment to this animal does not change the facts of this case." Crane's voice hardened. "Miss Mercer violated policy. The nature of her reason is irrelevant. If we allow exceptions based on emotional appeals, we undermine the very foundation of academic integrity." "This isn't about emotional appeals," Kyle said. "This is about common sense. Common sense is subjective. Policy is not. Policy that punishes people for saving lives is broken policy." Crane smiled coldly. "And who decides what constitutes a life worth saving? If Miss Mercer had stopped to help a stray cat, would we be having this hearing? A squirrel, a rat?" "Atlas isn't a rat. To the policy, he's just an animal, the same as any other." The room stirred. Some people nodded. Others looked uncomfortable. Crane was finding her footing, turning the argument toward abstract principles where emotion couldn't follow. Caroline Webb stood up. "Dean Crane raises an interesting point about policy. I'd like to call another witness to address it." Blackwell looked surprised. "Another witness? Dr. Samuel Torres, professor of veterinary ethics." Crane's expression flickered. Just for a moment. Then the mask was back. "Dr. Torres is a faculty member. His testimony would be biased. He's also a 40-year veteran of this profession and a recognized expert in medical ethics," Caroline replied. "I think the board would benefit from his perspective." Blackwell nodded. "Dr. Torres, please come forward." The crowd parted as Dr. Torres walked to the front of the room. He looked older somehow, wearier, as if the weight of everything he was about to say was already pressing down on his shoulders. He took his place beside the podium and looked directly at Dean Crane. "Victoria," he said quietly. He said, "I wish it hadn't come to this." Crane's jaw tightened. "Dr. Torres, please address the board, not me." Torres turned to face the regents. "Members of the board, I've taught at this institution for 22 years. In that time, I've watched it grow from a regional program into one of the most respected veterinary schools in the country." He paused. "I've also watched it lose its soul." The room went completely silent. "When I started teaching here, our mission statement said that we were training healers, people who would dedicate their lives to reducing suffering, people who would put the welfare of their patients above their own comfort." Torres pulled a piece of paper from his pocket. "Our current mission statement says we are producing industry-ready graduates with demonstrated competency in standardized protocols." He let that sink in. We stopped training healers. We started training technicians. And somewhere along the way, we forgot why any of us got into this profession in the first place. Dean Crane stepped forward. Dr. Torres, your philosophical concerns are noted, but they don't address the specific policy violation. I'm not finished. Torres's voice was quiet, but it cut through Crane's interruption like a scalpel. For the past 3 years, I've kept a file. A record of every student expelled from this institution during Dean Crane's tenure. He held up a thick folder. 14 students. Every single one of them expelled for what Dean Crane calls policy violations. Every single one of them punished for acts of compassion. Crane's face went pale. That file contains confidential student records. You have no right. I have every right. Torres's eyes were blazing. Marcus Chen expelled for leaving a rotation to help a suicidal classmate. Jennifer Okoye expelled for missing a deadline to volunteer after Hurricane Maria. David Reeves expelled for refusing to euthanize a healthy dog during a training exercise. He threw the folder onto the table. These aren't policy violations. These are acts of conscience. These are exactly the kinds of decisions we should be celebrating in future doctors. Crane's voice rose. Those students knew the rules. They chose to violate them. They chose to be human beings, Torres shouted. They chose compassion over compliance, and you destroyed them for it. The room erupted. People were shouting, some in support, some in protest. Camera flashes exploded like lightning. Blackwell banged his gavel repeatedly. Order, order. Everyone will be seated immediately, or this hearing will be cleared. Slowly, reluctantly, the chaos subsided. Patricia Chen leaned forward. Dr. Torres, these are serious allegations. Are you prepared to substantiate them? I am. Torres picked up the folder. Every document is here. Dates, circumstances, outcomes. I've also collected statements from 8 of the 14 expelled students, all of whom are willing to testify about their experiences. Crane was on her feet. This is a coordinated attack. Dr. Torres has clearly conspired with outside parties to undermine my authority. I've conspired with no one, Torres said calmly. I've simply documented the truth. The truth is that I have maintained the highest standards of academic excellence. The truth is that you've built your career on crushing anyone who shows the kind of character that makes a real doctor. Torres turned to face her directly. The truth is that you're afraid of people like Elena Mercer because they remind you of everything you're not. Crane's face contorted with rage. How dare you? How dare I tell the truth? Torres shook his head. Victoria, I've known you for 15 years. I've watched you climb over everyone who got in your way. I've watched you turn this institution into a factory that produces graduates who follow rules, but don't understand why the rules exist. He pointed at Elena. That young woman understood something you never have. She understood that being a doctor isn't about following protocols. It's about caring. About showing up when it matters. About putting someone else's life above your own convenience. He turned back to the board. If you expel Elena Mercer, you're not protecting standards. You're destroying them. You're telling every student in this institution that compassion is a liability, that caring too much will be punished, that the safest thing to do is look the other way when someone is suffering. His voice broke slightly. Is that really the lesson we want to teach? The room was absolutely still. Elena sat frozen in her chair, tears streaming down her face. Kyle stood beside her, his hand on Atlas's head, his expression unreadable. Howard Blackwell cleared his throat. "Thank you, Dr. Torres. Your testimony is noted." He looked at Dean Crane. "Dean Crane, do you wish to respond?" Crane stood motionless for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, colder, more controlled. Dr. Torres has made his feelings clear. He believes that emotions should override policy. He believes that good intentions excuse violations. He believes that we should abandon the standards that have made this institution great. She walked slowly toward the board. "I disagree. Standards exist for a reason. Without them, we have chaos. Without them, we have graduates who think they can decide for themselves which rules to follow and which to ignore." She stopped directly in front of Elena. Miss Mercer made a choice. She chose an animal over her education. She chose a momentary act of heroism over a lifetime of preparation. And now she wants us to reward that choice. Elena looked up at her. Their eyes met. "I don't want a reward," Elena said quietly. "I just want to be a doctor." "Then you should have made different choices." "I couldn't." "Couldn't or wouldn't." Elena's voice was steady. "When you see something suffering, you help. That's not a choice. That's who I am." Crane smiled coldly. "And that's exactly why you don't belong in this profession. Because being a doctor requires discipline. It requires the ability to prioritize. It requires understanding that you can't save everyone, and that trying to do so will only destroy you." She leaned closer. "You're a liability, Miss Mercer. A bleeding heart who will burn out within 5 years because you can't separate your emotions from your work." Elena stood up. She was shaking, but her voice didn't waver. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I will burn out. Maybe I'll spend my whole career caring too much and getting hurt too often." She stepped closer to Crane. "But at least I'll have cared. At least I'll have tried. At least I won't have spent my life punishing people for being human." Crane's eyes narrowed. "Is that what you think I do? That's what I know you do." The two women stood face to face. The room held its breath. "You don't know anything about me," Crane said. "I know enough." Elena's voice dropped. "I know that somewhere along the way you forgot why you became a doctor. I know that you've spent so long protecting yourself from feeling anything that you've forgotten how. And I know that when you look at me, you don't see a threat to your standards." She paused. "You see everything you wish you still were." Crane's composure cracked, just for a second. A flash of something raw and wounded crossed her face. Then it was gone. "This hearing is a farce," Crane said, turning away. "I refuse to participate in this charade any longer." She walked toward the door. "Dean Crane." Howard Blackwell's voice was sharp. "This board has not dismissed you." When Crane stopped, but didn't turn around. "You will remain until this hearing is concluded, or you will face immediate suspension pending a full investigation into Dr. Torres's allegations." Silence. Slowly, Crane turned back around. Her face was a mask again, but something had changed. The certainty was gone. The control was slipping. She walked back to her table and sat down. Blackwell nodded. "We will now hear closing arguments." "Ms. Webb," Caroline stood up. "Members of the board, the facts of this case are simple. Elena Mercer saw a dying animal. She saved its life. She missed an examination in the process. That's it. That's the entire violation." She walked toward the board. "You've heard testimony about what kind of person Elena Mercer is. You've heard about her character. You've heard about the life she saved and the sacrifices she made." She gestured at the crowd. "You've seen the hundreds of people who came here to support her. Veterans who understand what it means to sacrifice for others. Community members who believe that compassion should be celebrated, not punished. She turned to face Crane. And you've heard from a dean who believes that rules matter more than people, who believes that policy should be followed even when it leads to unjust outcomes, who has spent 11 years expelling students whose only crime was caring too much. Caroline turned back to the board. The question before you today isn't whether Elena Mercer violated policy. She did. The question is whether that policy serves the mission of this institution, whether it produces better doctors or worse ones, whether it builds character or destroys it. She paused. I believe the answer is clear, and I believe you know it. She sat down. Blackwell looked at Crane. Dean Crane, your closing statement. Crane stood up slowly. She looked around the room at the faces watching her, the cameras recording her, the crowd waiting to see her fall. When I became dean of this institution, she began, I made a promise. I promised that we would maintain the highest standards, that we would produce graduates who were reliable, disciplined, and prepared for the demands of professional practice. She clasped her hands in front of her. That promise has guided every decision I've made, every policy I've implemented, every difficult choice I've faced. She looked at Elena. Miss Mercer is not a bad person. She made a choice that many would consider noble. But noble choices have consequences. And the consequence of her choice was that she was not present for her examination. Crane turned to the board. If you overturn this expulsion, you send a message to every student in this institution. You tell them that rules can be broken if the reason is compelling enough. You tell them that emotional appeals can override policy. You tell them that standards are negotiable. She shook her head. I cannot support that message. I will not support it. If this board chooses to reinstate Miss Mercer, they do so over my objection. And they do so knowing that they have fundamentally undermined the principles that have made this institution what it is. She sat down. The room was silent. Howard Blackwell looked at his fellow board members. Are we prepared to vote? Nods around the table. Very well. The question before us is whether to overturn the expulsion of Elena Mercer and reinstate her to the veterinary program with full scholarship. All in favor? Elena couldn't breathe. She felt Kyle's hand on her shoulder, steady and strong. One by one, hands went up around the table. Patricia Chen, then another regent, then another. Elena counted. 7, 8, 9. All opposed, 2 hands, 3 hands, 9-3. Blackwell nodded. The motion carries. Elena Mercer's expulsion is hereby overturned. She is reinstated to the program effective immediately with full scholarship restored. The room exploded. Elena sat frozen, unable to process what had just happened. People were cheering, crying, embracing each other. Camera flashes popped like fireworks. Kyle pulled her to her feet. You did it, he said. You won. Elena shook her head. We did it. All of us. Atlas barked his tail, wagging furiously. Through the chaos, Elena saw Dr. Torres standing alone, tears streaming down his weathered face. She pushed through the crowd and threw her arms around him. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for fighting for me. Thank you for giving me something worth fighting for, Torres replied. Behind them, Dean Victoria Crane sat motionless at her table. Her lawyers were packing up their files, avoiding her eyes. The cameras had moved on to the celebration. She was alone. Blackwell's voice cut through the noise. One more matter before we adjourn. The room slowly quieted. In light of the testimony presented today, this board is initiating a formal review of Dean Crane's tenure. Pending the outcome of that review, she is hereby placed on administrative leave. Crane stood up. Her face was blank, empty, utterly defeated. "You're making a mistake," she said quietly. "All of you." No one responded. She gathered her papers and walked toward the door. The crowd parted for her, but no one looked at her. No one spoke to her. She was invisible. At the door, she paused. "Miss Mercer." Elena turned. Crane stood silhouetted against the light from the hallway. Her voice was barely audible. "I hope you prove me wrong." Then she walked out, and the door closed behind her. Outside the hearing room, the celebration continued for hours. Veterans lined up to shake Elena's hand. Students she'd never met hugged her and cried. Reporters shouted questions that she couldn't begin to answer. Through it all, Kyle stayed close. He never left her side. And neither did Atlas. Finally, when the crowd had thinned and the cameras had packed up, Elena found a quiet corner near the parking lot. She sat down on a bench and let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for days. Kyle sat down beside her. Atlas lay at their feet. "How do you feel?" Kyle asked. Elena laughed weakly. "I don't know. I can't feel anything yet. It's like my brain hasn't caught up to what happened." "That's normal. After combat, sometimes it takes days for the adrenaline to wear off." "This wasn't combat." Kyle smiled slightly. "Wasn't it?" Elena thought about Dean Crane's face, the hatred in her eyes, the conviction that she was right and everyone else was wrong. "I guess it was," she admitted. "In a way." They sat in silence for a moment. "What happens now?" Elena asked. "Now you go back to school. You finish your degree. You become the doctor you were always meant to be." "And you," Kyle looked down at Atlas. "I don't know. My deployment ends in 3 months. After that," he shrugged. "I haven't thought that far ahead." Elena hesitated. "You could stay. Here, I mean. In Virginia Beach." Kyle looked at her. Something shifted in his expression. "Why would I do that? Because Atlas likes it here." Elena smiled. "And because maybe I'd like to buy you dinner. To thank you. For everything." Kyle was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. A real smile, the first one Elena had seen from him, that wasn't tinged with sadness or anger. "I'd like that," he said. Atlas lifted his head and barked once, as if giving his approval. Elena laughed and reached down to scratch behind his ears. "It's settled then," she said. "We're a team now. All 3 of us." Kyle nodded. "All 3 of us." The sun was setting over Virginia Beach, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The storm that had started everything was long gone, replaced by a warmth that felt like promise. Elena didn't know what the future held. She didn't know how she would finish her degree, or what kind of doctor she would become, or where this strange friendship with Kyle and Atlas would lead. But for the first time in as long as she could remember, she wasn't afraid to find out. 3 weeks after the hearing, Elena walked into Dr. Torres's office and found him staring at a letter with tears in his eyes. She stopped in the doorway. "Dr. Torres, is everything okay?" He looked up slowly as if waking from a dream. "Close the door, Elena." She did. Torres held up the letter. His hands were trembling. "The board just appointed me interim dean." Elena's breath caught. "That's wonderful. You deserve it." "I don't know if I do." Torres set the letter down. "I spent 22 years watching Victoria Crane destroy students like you. 22 years of keeping files and taking notes and telling myself that someday I'd do something. His voice cracked. But I never did. Not until you forced my hand. Elena sat down across from him. You testified. You risked your career. I should have done it years ago. Marcus Chen, Jennifer Okoye, David Reeves. He shook his head. They're all out there somewhere, their lives derailed because I was too much of a coward to speak up. You spoke up when it mattered. Did I? Or did I just wait until someone else started the fight and then jump in when it was safe? Elena reached across the desk and took his hand. Dr. Torres, I wouldn't be here without you. None of this would have happened without you. Torres looked at her for a long moment. Then he squeezed her hand. You know what my first act as interim dean is going to be. What? He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a heavy bronze plaque. Elena recognized it immediately. The Zero Tolerance plaque that had hung in the administration lobby for 11 years. I'm taking this down, Torres said. Today, right now, and I'm replacing it with something else. With what? Torres smiled. You'll see. The new plaque went up the following morning. Elena stood in the lobby with Kyle and Atlas watching the maintenance workers drill holes in the wall. A small crowd had gathered, students and faculty and staff, all curious about what was happening. Dr. Torres stepped forward with the new plaque covered in a cloth. For 11 years, he said, his voice carrying through the lobby, this institution operated under a philosophy of fear. Students were told that rules mattered more than people, that compliance mattered more than compassion, that the safest thing to do was follow orders and never ask questions. He paused. That philosophy ends today. He pulled the cloth away. The plaque was bronze polished to a mirror shine. The words were etched in gold. Character is the first requirement of a healer. Compassion is not a weakness. Every heartbeat matters. Elena felt tears sliding down her cheeks. Kyle put his hand on her shoulder. That's because of you, he said quietly. All of that. It's because of all of us, Elena replied. Atlas barked once, and the crowd laughed. But the ripples of what had happened at that hearing were spreading far beyond the walls of Coastal Virginia Veterinary College. 2 days later, Elena received a phone call from a number she didn't recognize. Miss Mercer, this is Margaret Liu from Governor Thompson's office. Elena nearly dropped her phone. The governor's office? Yes, ma'am. Governor Thompson has been following your case closely. He'd like to meet with you in Richmond next week. Elena's mind went blank. Meet with me, why? The governor has some ideas about turning your story into something more permanent, something that could help other students in similar situations. Elena looked at Kyle, who was sitting across from her at the diner where they'd first met. He raised an eyebrow. Yes. Of course, I'd be honored. Excellent. I'll send you the details. And Miss Mercer. The governor wanted me to tell you something. What's that? He said that what you did reminded him why he served. He said the country needs more people like you. The line went dead. Elena stared at her phone. What was that about? Kyle asked. The governor wants to meet me. Kyle's coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. Governor Thompson. The Navy veteran. Yeah. Kyle set down his cup and smiled. Elena, I don't think you understand what's happening here. What do you mean? Your story isn't just a story anymore. It's becoming something bigger, something that could change things for a lot of people. Elena shook her head. I just saved a dog. I didn't do anything special. That's exactly what makes it special. Kyle leaned forward. You didn't think about it. You didn't calculate the risks. You just did what was right because it was right. That's rare. That's valuable. And people recognize it. Elena looked down at her hands. The same hands that had pressed against Atlas's wound in the rain. The same hands that had almost lost everything. I'm scared, she admitted. I don't know how to be whatever people think I am. You don't have to be anything except yourself. Kyle reached across the table and took her hand. That's been enough so far. The meeting with Governor Thompson happened the following Tuesday. Elena wore the blazer Kyle had given her and a pair of dress shoes she'd borrowed from Linda. She felt like an imposter walking into the state capitol, like someone was going to tap her on the shoulder and tell her there'd been a mistake. But no one did. Margaret Liu met her in the lobby and escorted her through a maze of hallways until they reached a door marked Governor. He's expecting you, Liu said. Good luck. Elena took a deep breath and walked in. Governor James Thompson was 64 years old, with silver hair and the kind of weathered face that came from decades of service. He stood up from behind his desk when Elena entered, and she noticed immediately that he moved with a slight limp. Miss Mercer, he said, extending his hand. It's an honor to meet you. The honor is mine, sir. Please sit down. He gestured to a chair. Can I get you anything coffee, water? I'm fine, thank you. Thompson sat back down. His eyes were sharp, assessing, but not unkind. I've been following your story since it first broke, he said. I served 2 tours in Vietnam. I know what it means to have a partner who's got your back when things go sideways. Elena nodded. Atlas is special. All military working dogs are special, but that's not why I asked you here. Thompson leaned forward. I asked you here because what happened to you should never have happened, and I want to make sure it never happens to anyone else. Elena felt her heart speed up. What do you mean, I'm proposing legislation, a law that would protect any student in Virginia from academic penalty for performing emergency life-saving assistance? We're calling it the Atlas Act. Elena couldn't speak. The bill has bipartisan support, Thompson continued. I've got 14 senators signed on already. If we push, we can have it on my desk by the end of the month. I don't know what to say. Say you'll help me get it passed. Thompson smiled. I need someone to testify before the legislature. Someone who can tell them what it feels like to be punished for doing the right thing. Elena thought about Dean Crane, about the cold emptiness in her eyes, about the 14 students whose lives had been destroyed because they cared too much. Yes, she said. I'll do it. Thompson stood up and extended his hand again. Welcome to the fight, Miss Mercer. The legislative hearing was held 3 weeks later in Richmond. Elena sat at a long table, facing a room full of state senators, her hands folded in front of her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. Kyle sat in the front row of the gallery Atlas beside him. They'd gotten special permission for the dog to attend. No one had objected. Senator Patricia Holloway, chair of the Education Committee, called the hearing to order. We are here today to consider Senate Bill 1247, the Atlas Act. The bill would prohibit any public institution of higher education from penalizing students for absences caused by emergency life-saving assistance. She looked at Elena. Miss Mercer, you may begin your testimony. Elena had prepared a speech. She'd written it out, revised it, practiced it in front of the mirror. But when she opened her mouth, the words on the page suddenly seemed inadequate. She set her notes aside. 3 months ago, she began, I was walking to the most important exam of my life. I was 20 minutes away from becoming a doctor, 20 minutes away from everything I'd worked for. She paused. And then I saw a dog bleeding in the street. The room was completely silent. I didn't think about my exam. I didn't think about my scholarship. I didn't think about my future. Elena's voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. I just saw a living thing in pain, and I couldn't walk away. She looked at the senators one by one. I know that some people think what I did was foolish, impractical, that I should have called animal control and kept walking, that my future was more important than a stranger's dog. She shook her head. But I couldn't, because if I had walked away, if I had let that dog die so I could take an exam, what kind of doctor would I have become? What kind of person? She glanced at Kyle. He nodded slightly. The Atlas Act isn't about me, Elena continued. It's about every student who will face a similar choice in the future. It's about telling them that compassion is not a liability, that caring about others is not a weakness, that doing the right thing will be protected, not punished. She took a deep breath. Senator Holloway, I'm not asking you to change the rules because I want special treatment. I'm asking you to change the rules because the old rules were wrong, because they punished people for being human, because they told students that their careers mattered more than someone else's life. She stood up. I became a veterinary student because I wanted to help animals. I wanted to reduce suffering. I wanted to be the kind of person who shows up when it matters. Her voice broke slightly. The Atlas Act would tell every student in Virginia that those values matter, that we want healers, not rule followers, that we want doctors who care. She looked at Atlas sitting calmly beside Kyle. That dog saved his handler's life twice in combat. And when he was dying in the street, I saved his. That's not a policy violation. That's the whole point of being a doctor. She sat down. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Senator Holloway spoke. Thank you, Miss Mercer. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify? A hand went up in the gallery. Elena turned. Her heart stopped. It was Dean Victoria Crane. The room erupted in murmurs. Senators exchanged glances. Elena felt Kyle's hand on her shoulder, steadying her. Senator Holloway banged her gavel. Order. Dr. Crane, you wish to testify. Crane stood up. She looked different than Elena remembered. Smaller, somehow. More fragile. I do. She walked to the testimony table and sat down. Her hands were folded in her lap, her posture rigid. Dr. Crane, Holloway said, you understand that you are here voluntarily, that nothing you say can be used against you in any ongoing proceedings. I understand. Then please proceed. Crane was silent for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. I came here to oppose this bill. Elena felt her stomach clench. I came here to argue that standards matter, that rules exist for a reason, that we cannot allow emotional appeals to override policy. Crane paused. But I can't. The room went completely still. I have spent 30 years in academic administration. I have built my career on discipline, on consistency, on treating every student exactly the same, regardless of circumstances. Her voice wavered. I told myself that I was protecting standards, maintaining excellence, doing what was best for the institution. She looked at Elena. But I wasn't. I was protecting myself from having to make difficult decisions, protecting myself from having to care about the people whose lives I was affecting. Tears were sliding down her cheeks now. I expelled 14 students during my tenure as dean. 14 young people whose only crime was caring too much. I told myself they were weak, undisciplined, unsuited for the profession. She shook her head. But they weren't weak. They were strong. Stronger than me, Because they were willing to risk everything for someone else, and I was only willing to follow rules. Crane turned to face the senators. I am not here to oppose the Atlas Act. I am here to support it. Because I spent my entire career being wrong, and I don't want anyone else to make the same mistake. She stood up. Miss Mercer, I owe you an apology. I owe you more than an apology. But this is all I can give you. She walked toward Elena and stopped directly in front of her. You were right about everything, and I'm sorry. Elena stared at her. This woman who had destroyed her dreams, who had called her a liability, who had tried to end her career before it even began. And now she was standing here broken and tearful, asking for forgiveness. Elena didn't know what to say. So she did the only thing that felt right. She stood up and hugged Victoria Crane. The room gasped, camera flashes exploded. Senators looked at each other in disbelief. Crane stiffened at first. Then slowly she hugged Elena back. Her body shook with sobs. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I forgive you, Elena said. The vote happened that afternoon. The Atlas Act passed unanimously. Every senator, every vote. Governor Thompson signed it into law 3 days later in a ceremony at the state capitol. Elena stood beside him as he put pen to paper, making it official. This law, Thompson said to the assembled crowd, represents the best of what Virginia can be. It tells our students that character matters, that compassion matters, that we value healers who care about the lives they're trying to save. He turned to Elena. Miss Mercer, would you like to say a few words? Elena stepped up to the microphone. The crowd was huge, filling the Capitol steps and spilling onto the lawn below. She saw Kyle and Atlas near the front. She saw Dr. Torres. She saw Doctor. She saw Linda and classmates and veterans she'd never met but who had come to support her. 3 months ago, she said, I was nobody, just a struggling student trying to survive. I didn't have money or connections or power. I didn't have anything except a choice. She paused. And I chose to help. I chose to stop. I chose to believe that every life matters even when it costs you something. She looked out at the crowd. That choice almost destroyed me. But it also saved me. It showed me who I really am. It connected me with people I never would have known. It created something that will outlast all of us. She held up the pen Governor Thompson had used to sign the bill. This law is not about me. It's about everyone who will face a similar choice in the future. It's about telling them that they're not alone, that their compassion will be protected, that doing the right thing matters. She smiled. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for fighting for me. And thank you for showing me that the good guys can still win. The crowd erupted in applause. Elena stepped back from the microphone. Kyle was there immediately, pulling her into a tight embrace. You did it, he said. We did it. Atlas barked and pushed between them, his tail wagging furiously. Elena laughed and knelt down to hug him. You too, buddy. None of this would have happened without you. Atlas licked her face, and she didn't care who was watching. That night, Elena sat on the steps of her apartment building looking up at the stars. Kyle sat beside her, Atlas lying at their feet. What now? Elena asked. Now you finish school. You become a doctor. You save lives. And you, Kyle was quiet for a moment. I put in my retirement papers last week. Elena turned to look at him. You're leaving the army. I've been fighting for 12 years, other people's wars, other people's causes. He looked at her. I think it's time I found something worth fighting for that's actually mine. And have you found something? Kyle smiled. I think I have. Elena felt her heart speed up. Kyle, I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I know you've got school. I know you've got your whole life ahead of you. I'm just saying, I'd like to be part of it, if you'll let me. Elena looked at him. This man who had appeared in her life like a storm, who had fought for her when no one else would, who had shown her what it meant to be protected. I'd like that too, she said. Atlas lifted his head and barked once. I think he approves, Kyle said. Elena laughed. I think he does. She leaned against Kyle's shoulder, and he put his arm around her. Above them, the stars burned bright against the darkness. And for the first time in her life, Elena Mercer felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. 2 years passed like a heartbeat, and a lifetime all at once. Elena Mercer stood in front of her bathroom mirror on graduation morning, staring at a woman she barely recognized. Her hair was longer, now swept back in an elegant style that Linda had spent an hour perfecting. Her eyes were clearer, steadier, carrying a confidence that had been forged in fire. She was 27 years old. She had survived storms, heartbreak, public humiliation, and a battle that had changed Virginia law. And today, she would become Dr. Elena Mercer. Her phone buzzed. A text from Kyle. You ready? She typed back. Terrified. Good. That means you care. Elena smiled and set down her phone. On her dresser sat a framed photograph. It showed her kneeling in the rain, her arms wrapped around a bleeding German shepherd, her face streaked with tears and determination. Someone had taken it from across the street that morning 2 years ago. It had appeared in newspapers and magazines across the country. She touched the frame gently. We made it, buddy, she whispered. The graduation ceremony was held in the university stadium, the same stadium where Elena had once imagined accepting her degree alone, anonymous, just another face in the crowd. That was not what happened. When she arrived at the staging area behind the stage, Dr. Torres was waiting for her. He looked different too. The weight of the interim dean position had aged him, but there was a light in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Dr. Mercer, he said, using the title she hadn't yet earned, but somehow felt right. Are you prepared? I don't know if anyone can be prepared for this. Torres smiled. You've been preparing for this your entire life. You just didn't know it. He handed her a folder. Your speech notes, though I suspect you won't need them. Elena took the folder, but didn't open it. Dr. Torres, I never properly thanked you. For everything. The hearing, the testimony, the support over these past 2 years. You don't need to thank me. Yes, I do. Elena's voice was firm. You risked your career. You stood up when no one else would. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Torres's eyes glistened. Elena, when I was young, I made a choice. I found a dying dog on the side of the road, and I carried him 2 miles to a vet clinic. That moment defined my entire life. He put his hand on her shoulder. When I saw you do the same thing, I knew I was looking at myself. A younger, braver version of myself. Someone who hadn't yet learned to compromise. Someone who still believed that doing the right thing was always the right thing. He squeezed her shoulder. You didn't just save Atlas that day. You saved me. You reminded me why I became a doctor in the first place. Elena hugged him, holding tight, letting the tears come. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. The graduates assembled in a long line outside the stadium entrance. Elena was at the front. Valedictorian, the highest academic honor the school could bestow. 2 years ago, she had been expelled. Today, she would lead her class across the stage. The irony was not lost on her. She felt a presence beside her, and turned to find Sarah Park, the administrative assistant who had burst into Torres's office 2 years ago with news of the protest. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" Sarah was wearing a graduation gown. She was crying. "I'm graduating," she said, "because of you." Elena stared at her. "I don't understand." "After your hearing, I went to Dr. Torres. I told him I wanted to change my major. I wanted to become a veterinarian." Sarah wiped her eyes. "He told me I'd need to start over. 4 more years of school. I didn't care." She grabbed Elena's hand. "Watching you stand up to Dean Crane, watching you fight for what was right even when everything was against you, it changed something in me. It made me believe that maybe I could do something meaningful with my life too." Elena felt her own tears starting. "Sarah, I just wanted you to know, before you give your speech, before you become Dr. Mercer officially." Sarah squeezed her hand. "You didn't just save one life that day. You saved mine too." She hugged Elena quickly, then disappeared back into the crowd of graduates. Elena stood alone at the front of the line, her heart full to bursting. The stadium doors opened. The brass notes of pomp and circumstance floated through the air as the graduates began their march. Elena stepped forward, and the crowd rose to its feet. It wasn't the polite standing ovation of a typical graduation. It was something else entirely. A roar of voices, a thunder of applause, a wave of emotion that swept through the stadium like a physical force. Elena looked out at the stands and felt her breath catch. The front section was filled with veterans, 75 of them at least wearing their VFW caps and American Legion colors. They had come from across Virginia, from neighboring states, from as far away as Texas and California. They had driven through the night, taken time off work, spent money they didn't have, all to be here for this moment. They were holding signs. "Our girl did it. Atlas says congratulations. From one hero to another." Elena's legs almost gave out. She kept walking. The graduates filed into their seats. Elena took her place in the front row, her hands trembling, her heart pounding. The university president, a kind-faced man who had replaced the entire administration after the Crane scandal, approached the podium. "Welcome to the graduation ceremony for the class of 2027, he said. "Before we begin, I want to recognize a special presence in our audience today." He gestured toward the veterans section. "These men and women served our country with honor and distinction. They came here today to support one of their own, a young woman who reminded all of us what it means to be a hero." The veterans stood as one. They placed their hands over their hearts. Elena felt the tears streaming down her face. "And now," the president continued, "it is my honor to introduce our valedictorian, a student who came to us from humble beginnings, a student who faced adversity that would have broken most people, a student who taught this university a lesson we will never forget." He smiled. "Ladies and gentlemen, Elena Mercer." The applause was deafening. Elena stood up. Her legs felt like water. She walked to the podium, gripping the edges to steady herself. She looked out at the thousands of faces, the parents who had sacrificed, the professors who had taught, the friends who had supported, the strangers who had believed. And in the front row, standing beside a massive German shepherd with a red, white, and blue ribbon on his collar, was Kyle Brennan. He was wearing his service dress uniform, every medal, every ribbon. His eyes were fixed on her with a fierce, protective pride. Elena took a deep breath. "We are taught," she began, her voice clear and strong, "that medicine is the science of fixing what is broken. We learn anatomy, pathology, pharmacology. We memorize dosages and protocols and procedures." She paused. But the most important lesson I learned didn't come from a textbook. It came from a choice. She gripped the podium. 2 years ago, I was walking to the most important exam of my life. I was 20 minutes away from everything I'd worked for, and then I saw a dog bleeding in the street. The stadium was absolutely silent. I had a decision to make. I could keep walking. I could take my exam. I could become a doctor the easy way, the safe way, the way that didn't cost me anything. She shook her head. Or I could stop. I could help. I could risk everything for a stranger's dog because that's what healers do. Her voice broke slightly. I chose to stop. I chose to care. I chose to believe that every heartbeat matters even when it costs you everything you have. She looked at Kyle. That choice almost destroyed me. I was expelled. My scholarship was revoked. My future was gone. I spent nights wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. She smiled through her tears. But then something happened. People I'd never met started fighting for me. Veterans who understood sacrifice. Students who understood compassion. A soldier who understood what it meant to have someone save the thing you love most in this world. She turned to face the veterans section. You didn't know me. You didn't owe me anything. But you showed up. You stood outside those gates. You refused to let an injustice stand. Her voice rose. And because of you, because of all of you, I'm standing here today. Not just as a graduate, not just as a doctor, but as proof that doing the right thing is never the wrong choice. The applause started in the veterans section and spread like wildfire. Elena waited for it to die down. Being a doctor isn't about being perfect, she continued. It's about showing up. It's about understanding that we carry a sacred trust. The trust of every creature who comes to us in pain, looking for help, looking for hope. She looked at Atlas. That dog saved his handler's life twice in combat. He took bullets. He faced explosions. He did his duty without question, without hesitation, because that's who he was. Her voice softened. And when he was lying in that gutter, bleeding and scared and alone, he looked up at me with eyes that said one thing. Help me. She paused. How could I walk away from that? How could any of us... She straightened. Today we become doctors. We take an oath to heal, to protect, to serve. But that oath means nothing if we're not willing to sacrifice for it, if we're not willing to stop when the world says go, to care when the rules say ignore. She raised her voice. We are the healers. We are the helpers. We are the ones who show up when it matters. And starting today, we carry that responsibility with honor. She looked out at her classmates. So make the choice, every time. Choose compassion over convenience. Choose courage over comfort. Choose to be the kind of doctor you'd want if you were the one lying in that gutter. Her final words rang through the stadium. Because that's what healers do. That's who we are. And that's the legacy we will leave behind. The stadium erupted. People were on their feet. Caps were flying into the air. The veterans were cheering, some of them crying openly. Elena stepped back from the podium, her entire body shaking. The president approached her with her diploma. Dr. Elena Mercer, he said, loud enough for the microphone to pick up. It is my honor to present you with your degree. You have earned it in every way that matters. Elena took the diploma. The paper felt impossibly light in her hands. She had done it. She was a doctor. The ceremony continued, but Elena barely heard it. She sat in her chair, clutching her diploma, watching her classmates cross the stage one by one. When the final graduate had received their degree, the president returned to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the graduating class of 2027. The crowd roared. Graduates hugged each other, threw their caps, embraced their families. The stadium became a sea of chaos and joy. Elena pushed through the crowd, looking for the one person she needed to see. She found Kyle near the exit tunnel, exactly where she knew he would be. He was standing at attention Atlas beside him, both of them waiting for her. She stopped 5 feet away. For a moment they just looked at each other. So much had happened. So much had changed. And yet here they were, exactly where they were supposed to be. Kyle didn't say a word. Slowly, with the precision of 20 years of service, he raised his hand and rendered a crisp, perfect salute. It was the salute given to officers, to flags, to the fallen, to those who had earned the highest respect. Elena felt her breath catch. She didn't salute back. She wasn't military, but she placed her hand over her heart, mirroring the oath he had made in that diner 2 years ago. Atlas broke his stay. He let out a single deep, joyous bark that echoed through the stadium like a cannon shot of celebration. His tail wagged furiously, thumping against Kyle's leg. Kyle dropped his salute and smiled. A real smile, warm and open, and full of everything he'd never been able to say. "Mission accomplished, Doctor." Elena ran the last few feet. She threw her arms around his neck and held on like she would never let go. He hugged her back, strong and steady the way he always was. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for believing in me, for fighting for me, for being here. There's nowhere else I'd rather be." She pulled back and looked into his eyes. "Kyle, yeah, these past 2 years. Working together, building something, I need you to know that it meant everything to me." Kyle's expression softened. "Elena, I need to tell you something." "What?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Elena's heart stopped. "I know this is crazy," Kyle said. "I know we've only known each other 2 years. I know you've got your whole career ahead of you, and I'm just a retired soldier with a dog and too many nightmares." He opened the box. Inside was a simple diamond ring, elegant and perfect. "But I can't imagine my life without you. I don't want to. You saved my dog. You saved me. You showed me that there's still good in this world worth fighting for." His voice cracked. "Elena Mercer, will you marry me?" The crowd around them had gone silent. People were watching, phones raised, tears streaming down faces. Elena looked at the ring. She looked at Kyle. She looked at Atlas, whose tail was wagging so hard his entire body was shaking. She thought about everything that had led to this moment. The storm. The choice. The pain. The triumph. The 2 years of building something beautiful out of the ashes of her destroyed dreams. She thought about her mother, who had never lived to see her become a doctor. She thought about the dog in the gutter, who had changed everything. She thought about the life stretching out before her and the man who wanted to share it. "Yes," she said. The word came out as a whisper, but it carried the weight of everything she felt. "Yes. 1,000 times, yes." Kyle's face broke into the biggest smile she'd ever seen. He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had always been meant to be there. Then, he kissed her. The crowd erupted. Veterans whooped and hollered. Students applauded. Someone started chanting, "Elena, Elena," and the whole stadium joined in. Atlas barked and jumped between them. and they both laughed, kneeling down to embrace the dog, who had brought them together. Dr. Torres appeared through the crowd, tears streaming down his face. "I knew it," he said. "I knew this was going to happen." "You knew he was going to propose?" Elena asked. "He asked my permission 3 months ago." Torres smiled. "I told him if he didn't do it today, I would propose to you myself." Elena laughed and hugged him. The veterans surrounded them, shaking Kyle's hand, embracing Elena, patting Atlas on the head. They were family now, all of them bound together by something stronger than blood. Marcus Webb. Kyle's old commanding officer pushed through the crowd. His prosthetic leg gleamed in the sunlight, but he moved with the confidence of a man who had made peace with his scars. "Welcome to the family, Doc," he said to Elena. "You're one of us now." "I always was," Elena replied. "I just didn't know it." That evening, Elena and Kyle sat on the steps of the veterinary school, watching the sun set over Virginia Beach. Atlas lay at their feet, his head resting on Elena's shoe, his eyes half closed in contentment. Elena looked at the ring on her finger. It caught the fading light and sparkled. "I still can't believe this is real," she said. "Which part?" "The graduation, the proposal, or the fact that you're going to spend the rest of your life with a broken-down soldier?" Elena smiled. "All of it." Kyle put his arm around her. "You know what I think about sometimes." "What?" "That morning. The storm. If Atlas hadn't gotten out. If you hadn't been walking that exact route. If you had just kept going to your exam." He shook his head. "We would never have met. None of this would have happened. The law wouldn't exist. Those 14 students Dean Crane expelled would still be struggling. Everything would be different." Elena thought about it. "But it didn't happen that way." "No, it didn't." Kyle looked at her. "Because you made a choice. A choice that changed everything." "I didn't know it would change everything. I just did what felt right." "That's the point." Kyle's voice was quiet. "You didn't know. You couldn't know. But you did it anyway. That's what makes it matter." Atlas lifted his head and whined softly. Elena reached down and scratched behind his ears. "And you, buddy, you started all of this." Atlas's tail thumped against the ground. "He's a good dog," Kyle said. "The best dog." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the sky turn from orange to purple to deep blue. "What happens now?" Elena asked. "Now we build a life. You save animals. I support you. We wake up every morning next to each other, and we're grateful." "That's simple," Kyle smiled. "The best things always are." Elena leaned against him, feeling the warmth of his body, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. She thought about the girl she had been 2 years ago, desperate, struggling alone, walking through a storm with nothing but hope and determination. She thought about the woman she had become. Doctor, fighter, survivor, loved. She thought about all the people whose lives had intersected with hers. Dr. Torres, the veterans, Sarah Park, even Victoria Crane, who had found redemption in her own way. She thought about her mother, who had always told her to keep moving. "Mom," she whispered too softly for Kyle to hear. "I made it. I hope you're proud." The stars were coming out now, scattered across the darkening sky like diamonds. Elena looked up at them and smiled. She had walked through the storm. She had made the choice. She had paid the price and reaped the reward. And now, with Kyle beside her, and Atlas at her feet, and a ring on her finger, and a degree in her hand, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. the storm was over. The sun was rising. And in the heart of America, against all odds, against all expectations, against everything that had tried to break her, Elena Mercer had won. Not because she was special. Not because she was lucky. Not because the universe had decided to be kind. But because she had stopped. Because she had cared. Because she had refused to walk away from a dying dog in the rain. And that single choice, that moment of compassion on a stormy October morning, had changed everything. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to subscribe and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. We are building a family here, just like Elena and Kyle and the veterans found each other, and we would love for you to be a part of it. Now let us pray. Heavenly Father, we ask for your protection over every person listening right now. Give us the strength to be kind in a cruel world, the courage to stop when the world says go, and the faith to know that doing the right thing is always the right choice. Bless our homes, our families, and the brave men and women who serve us. Watch over every creature, great and small, and give us hearts that never turn away from those in need. If you believe in the power of compassion and the grace of second chances, please type Amen in the comments below. And remember, every choice matters. Every heartbeat counts. Every act of kindness ripples outward in ways we can never imagine. Be the person who stops. Be the person who cares. Be the person who changes everything.